Welcome back to the deep dive. We are incredibly excited to jump into the materials you've sent over today. You have provided us with a massive and frankly fascinating stack of intelligence.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable cross-section of data you've compiled for us.
It is. I mean, we are looking at Ireland's high-level National Digital and AI Strategy 2030, the Digital Ireland Framework, and then alongside that, some very revealing private sector dossiers detailing a company called Brehon AI Solutions. Oh, and incredibly, you also included an audio recording that breaks down a real-time AI golf caddy.
Which is such a specific inclusion.
Right. But I promise we will get to it because it honestly blew my mind.
The contrast is what makes this so valuable. You've given us macro-level government policy sitting right alongside highly specific private sector execution.
Exactly, and it's exactly what we need to get a complete picture of what's actually happening on the ground. Now, you've given us a very specific mission for this deep dive. You asked us to act, essentially, as Brehon AI Solutions.
Right, as an ethical AI governance and infrastructure advisory firm.
Exactly. Your brief is very clear here. Evaluate Ireland's digital strategy from an executive infrastructure-first perspective. So, as an advisory firm acting on your behalf, we are going to structure this conversation as a rigorous, unvarnished assessment.
And let's establish the parameters for how we are going to approach your request right out of the gate. We are operating purely on an infrastructure and auditability basis. There is absolutely no room for political commentary or ideological spin here.
Yeah, we're stripping all of that away.
We are stripping away the Silicon Valley marketing hype, too. Our goal is a calm, executive-level evaluation to answer one fundamental question for you. Is Ireland's approach to AI governance mere theater, or is it robust, sustainable infrastructure?
So let's start with the executive summary and, look at the strategic strengths. Because when you read through the 2030 strategy you sent, the sheer ambition is staggering. Ireland isn't just dipping a toe in the water to see how this AI thing pans out.
No, they are already a massive digital hub.
Right. Looking at the metrics in your notes, Ireland currently hosts 8 of the leading foundation AI model providers and boasts 13 unicorn companies. The state is making systemic moves with their Better Public Services 2030 plan, which really signals a total digital transformation.
That is the macro picture, and the momentum is undeniably strong. But if we are acting as your advisory firm, we have to look past the momentum and identify the structural weaknesses.
You like to look for the cracks.
Exactly. There's a brilliant white paper in your stack titled Architects of Governance, the Cork AI Inflection Point, and it perfectly captures the underlying tension of this entire strategy. It contrasts what it calls macro policy gravity with microstructural precision.
I flagged that exact phrase when I was reading through. It seems to point out this massive collision course between grand political ambition and privately built governance architecture.
It does. The central vulnerability highlighted in that Cork document is that the state's massive vision is colliding with the reality that the actual functional governance architecture is largely being built by private enterprises.
So the government has the vision, but the actual mechanics are outsourced.
Essentially, yes. The government has the strategy, but the technical validation lifecycle, that microstructural precision required to actually audit an AI system securely, is still playing a frantic game of catch-up.
Which naturally leads us right into an architecture review.
Yeah.
If we look at institutional ownership, the strategy outlines several newly proposed state bodies. We have the AI Office of Ireland, a new AI advisory unit dedicated to the public service, and the Digital Regulators Group, or the DRG.
That's a lot of acronyms.
It's a ton of acronyms. But looking at all these overlapping entities, it raises a massive red flag for any executive who truly owns AI accountability here.
That is the multi-million-dollar question. The dynamic between the state and the private sector here is completely inverted compared to traditional infrastructure. Usually, the state builds the roads and private companies build the cars.
Right, but here...
Here, the state is trying to define the rules of the road, while private firms like Brehon AI Solutions, which features heavily in the dossiers you provided, are independently paving the highways, building the cars, and occasionally inventing entirely new modes of transport altogether.
And when you look for a national AI governance spine, a unified state-mandated system for lifecycle control, it's just not there. The state has published guidelines for the responsible use of AI in the public service. But, as you and I both know, in a corporate environment, guidelines are not guardrails.
Guidelines are suggestions.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the private sector is already pushing strict reference frameworks.
Precisely. And this is where the gap between theater and infrastructure becomes really visible. The state is issuing high-level guidelines, but the private sector dossiers you provided show companies positioning themselves around granular lifecycle governance, rigid risk management, and preemptive regulatory alignment.
When we look at the Davincia Plus image you provided, and by the way, brilliant find on that one, it really forces us to ask who is driving the standards. It's an image of a sleek, dark stone surface with Davincia Plus embossed on it.
It's a very striking visual.
Very striking. Your notes detailed that this is a public reference framework published by Award Publications in collaboration with Brehon AI. It's version 1.0, and it's explicitly focused on making AI audit-ready and regulator-aligned, especially for high-scrutiny environments like education.
Which tells us a lot.
It shows the private sector isn't waiting for the government to finalize the paperwork. They are building the structural architecture right now.
Because the market demands it. If we pivot to regulatory alignment, the EU AI Act is the massive regulatory tidal wave approaching the shore. The strategy notes that the new AI Office of Ireland will act as the central coordinating authority for the EU AI Act locally.
So they are setting up a local enforcer.
Yes, which creates a sectoral model of enforcement. It's designed to provide clarity for enterprises trying to navigate compliance.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second. The strategy touts this AI regulatory sandbox launching in 2026. They frame it as an innovation hub, where startups and SMEs can test AI solutions alongside compliance experts. But frankly, isn't a sandbox just a polite way of saying the government is letting tech companies grade their own homework in a legally protected bubble?
It's a valid skepticism, and it's a very common critique of sandboxes, but mechanically, under the EU AI Act, it serves a highly specific legal function. It is not a free pass.
So what does it actually do?
It operates as a controlled safe harbor where companies can test the edge cases of the EU AI Act before going to market. Say a company develops a novel AI tool for healthcare triage. The regulations might be ambiguous.
Right, because it's a new use case.
Exactly. The sandbox allows them to test the real-world application with regulators literally in the room, identifying compliance gaps before deployment. It's pre-market compliance, not deregulation.
That makes sense. It's about spotting the liabilities early. And speaking of liabilities, from a procurement standpoint, the upcoming National Public Procurement Strategy is supposed to determine if central AI procurement is even feasible for public offices.
Yes, that will be a massive hurdle.
But before any public sector body buys a single algorithm, your sources highlight a crucial infrastructural safeguard that I found really impressive.
You're referring to the National Cybersecurity Center, the NCSC, providing a national AI cyber risk assessment.
Yes, that's the one.
This is vital infrastructure. It establishes a mandate to assess and manage security and resilience risks before any public sector deployment happens. It introduces model risk classification readiness right into the procurement pipeline.
Right, because you can have all the compliant software in the world, but if the physical hardware and data pipelines aren't secure, you're building a castle on sand, which takes us straight into infrastructure readiness.
The foundation of it all.
Exactly. The physical hardware goals here are massive. By 2030, Ireland aims for gigabit connectivity everywhere and new subsea cables. But the most significant elements are the Euro-HPC joint undertaking projects. The sources mention the case pair supercomputer and the AI factory antenna, or AIF IRL antenna, managed by ICTC.
Let's unpack the Euro-HPC initiative because this is critical for your valuation. The European High-Performance Computing Joint Undertaking isn't just about buying faster laptops for government workers.
No, it's a massive scale-up.
It's a pooled European initiative to build top-tier, continent-level supercomputers. By integrating into this, Ireland isn't just building local server farms. They are positioning themselves as a central node in a European superbrain capable of handling massive AI workloads.
And to train those models, you need data. The Public Service Data Strategy 2030 aims to treat national data as a strategic asset.
Right.
Part of that is the rollout of Ireland's government digital wallet, which the sources note incorporates IDS 2.0.
Which is a huge lead forward.
For those of us who don't read EU digital identity regulations over breakfast, what does IDS 2.0 actually mean for an executive looking at interoperability?
IIS 2.0 is a game changer for digital infrastructure. It is a unified European digital identity framework. Instead of fragmented, nation-specific login portals, it provides a standardized digital wallet.
So it's seamless across borders.
Yes, it allows an Irish citizen to legally prove their identity, their age, or their professional credentials securely across borders anywhere in the EU. When you combine that level of authenticated data with supercomputing compute power, you have incredibly mature data governance infrastructure.
But having a massive, centralized digital identity framework and continent-level supercomputing makes you an incredibly lucrative target for threat actors.
Absolutely, which requires a military-grade cybersecurity posture. The strategy leans heavily on the NIS2 directive, the Network and Information Security Directive.
That's the one with the personal liability, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a crucial piece of EU legislation that legally forces critical infrastructure providers to maintain top-tier cybersecurity, holding executives personally liable for breaches in some cases. The state is backing this up with 23 million euros in European Digital Innovation Hub, or EDIH, funding.
And the prime example of this infrastructure readiness in your stack is the collaboration between the NCSC and UCD researchers at CyberCore. What they are doing is brilliant.
It solves a massive operational problem.
It does. Sharing cyber threat intelligence between agencies is notoriously slow because it's a huge human bottleneck. Analysts are terrified of accidentally sharing sensitive operational data or exposing proprietary vulnerabilities.
Precisely. The human hesitation slows down the entire defense mechanism.
So they're using an AI-supported solution to automatically sanitize, classify, and transform this highly sensitive threat intelligence. The AI strips out the identifying data instantly so the threat signatures can be shared securely across the network at machine speed.
It is a textbook example of infrastructure maturity. They are using AI to protect the AI ecosystem itself. But this brings us to what might be the most fragile layer of this entire strategy, the human in the loop and the capability layer.
Because you can deploy Casper supercomputers and IADAS wallets all day long. But if the workforce doesn't understand the tools, the infrastructure fails.
Exactly.
The ambition for the workforce here is vast. The strategy outlines that all public servants will be supported to take AI training in 2026. And for the private sector, they're launching an observatory for business AI readiness, or OBER, to monitor enterprise adoption, alongside a national skills observatory to track labor market trends.
What the state is attempting to build here is dual literacy. They need domain experts, say a senior civil engineer or a healthcare administrator who also possess deep AI risk awareness.
So what does this actually look like when it's functioning perfectly? This is where I want to pull in the most surprising and, frankly, my favorite piece of source material you provided, the audio file about the professional golfer Gary Ward and Ethicum AI.
It's a fascinating inclusion.
You also included that slick promotional image from Brehon AI Solutions for the Alex Wenger AI golf coach, showing a golfer looking out over a stunning coastal course.
At first glance, a sports AI case study feels out of place in a national government strategy evaluation. But mathematically, it is the perfect analogy for capability layering and institutional oversight.
It really is. The audio breaks down how Ithacum AI didn't replace the golfer, it replaced his entire front office. We're talking about an AI processing a real-time data stream of wind vectors and historical probabilities.
It's handling the environmental map.
But it goes deeper. It handles his calendar management. I actually laughed out loud at the part where the AI forces mandatory recovery periods. Honestly, I would love an AI that legally mandates my nap times.
It sounds amusing, but the underlying mechanism is profound. It's cognitive load management. The AI is constantly monitoring his physical and biometric recovery, acting as a real-time mental coach. If the biometric telemetry detects a spike in heart rate indicating stress, the AI prompts a physiological reset.
Right. Gary Ward explicitly said the AI allowed him to stop thinking. It entirely removed the cognitive load of doing math, managing logistics, and tracking sponsorships, allowing the human to simply execute the physical swing.
And if we synthesize this back to your evaluation, this is exactly what the Irish state wants for its workforce.
The public servant as the golfer.
Precisely. The goal of the Better Public Services 2030 plan is not to replace the public servant. The objective is to deploy AI to handle the logistical front office, the data analysis, the cross-referencing, the endless form filling.
By removing that cognitive load, it leaves the human in the loop with the mental bandwidth to execute complex, empathetic decision-making.
It is the ultimate human-in-the-loop analogy, which transitions us to Ireland's economic and strategic positioning.
When we look at the landscape, Ireland has a massive competitive advantage. They are a member of the D9 Plus group, the alliance of the most advanced digital nations in the EU. They have a deep, established talent pool. The physical data center infrastructure is already entrenched.
Yet your sources highlight a critical dichotomy that threatens this positioning. The question isn't whether Ireland will use AI, it's whether Ireland will merely consume foreign AI or build its own. Will it be a consumer nation, utterly dependent on external vendors, or an architect nation?
You shared another image with us that illustrates this perfectly. It's the Corkonian image. It features this highly structured, brick-built superhero figure standing watch over a cityscape with the text anatomy of a governed myth and structured architecture.
That image is highly symbolic of the strategic choice at hand. It represents the necessity of building a deeply structured, governed AI culture from the ground up, brick by brick. Ireland must become an AI architect nation to survive and maintain its competitive advantage against highly digitized regions like the UK, Switzerland, or the Nordics.
Because relying on imported governance frameworks is a strategic vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay, we've analyzed the strengths, the architecture, and the positioning. But to deliver a true executive evaluation, we have to look at the fault lines. Based on the intelligence you provided, we've synthesized the top 7 structural risks that could undermine this entire digital strategy over the next decade.
And keep in mind, these do not exist in isolation. They compound each other.
Let's start with the physical limitations. Risk number 1 is energy constraints. Training and running AI models requires massive compute power, specifically for inference workloads.
Right. Inference workloads, meaning the energy required every single time a user prompts an AI or runs a query, it's not a one-time energy cost, it's continuous.
Exactly. And the massive energy demands of the data centers required to process these workloads are on a violent collision course with the state's green transition and climate goals. You cannot be the greenest country in Europe while simultaneously powering server farms that draw more megawattage than a small city.
Which feeds directly into risk number 2, geopolitical and dependency risk. Because if energy constraints limit domestic data center growth, and so many global tech companies are headquartered in Ireland, the state becomes over-reliant on foreign critical digital value chains.
If the compute power sits outside the jurisdiction, so does the control.
Moving to the bureaucratic layer, risk 3 is regulatory fragmentation. The government has created the Digital Regulators Group, but there is a severe risk of these multiple agencies becoming siloed fiefdoms. If they do not implement enforced single reporting mechanisms, enterprises will be crushed under conflicting compliance mandates.
And even if the regulations are clear, you hit risk 4, the execution gap. It is incredibly difficult to transition from reading a high-level guideline PDF to actually executing measurable, audit-ready procurement in an everyday public office. A hospital administrator doesn't need a guideline. They need a validated software vendor.
Risk 5 involves the technology turning on itself. Cyber threats to AI. The NCSC explicitly notes that AI introduces entirely novel vulnerabilities. We aren't just talking about hackers stealing passwords anymore.
We are talking about model manipulation and adversarial data poisoning.
Yes, where threat actors subtly corrupt the training data so the AI intentionally makes flawed decisions while appearing completely normal.
That is terrifying from an audit perspective. Risk 6 is brand and compliance collisions, which we see highlighted in the Brehon PR dossier. There's a massive market risk of AI washing.
Everyone is going to claim they are the best.
Right. Companies will inevitably use unsubstantiated superlatives, claiming to be Ireland's leading or the world's first AI solution. This confuses procurement officers and creates massive legal exposure if a company treats audit ready as a marketing buzzword rather than a rigorous, legally binding governance posture.
And finally, risk 7, skills displacement. Despite the focus on the human in the loop, there is a severe risk of worker burnout and job displacement. If the new National Skills Observatory cannot track and respond to the blistering, exponential speed of AI deployment in the private sector, the workforce will be left behind.
So, as your advisory firm, what are our strategic recommendations to navigate these risks? Let's break this down by timeline for your executive planning. Immediate term, looking at the next 0 to 12 months. The 2026 priorities have to be executed flawlessly.
That is non-negotiable.
That means officially launching the AI Office of Ireland with teeth, establishing Phase 1 of the AI Regulatory Sandbox, opening OBEAR to start gathering real enterprise data, and initiating the GovTech Challenge to aggressively match local SMEs with public service problems.
Looking midterm, over the next 2 to 5 years, the focus must shift to healthcare integration and embedded expertise. The state must deliver on Digital for Care 2030, which aims for the full digitization of health records by 2032.
That's a huge undertaking.
It is. And simultaneously, they need to aggressively expand the National AI Fellowship Program. You cannot regulate what you do not understand, so they must embed actual practicing AI researchers directly into government departments.
And long-term, looking at a 10-year national positioning strategy, they need to fully integrate the CAS-payer and Euro-HPC supercomputing ecosystem into the daily operations of the state. Furthermore, they must establish the Cybersecurity Research Center of Excellence by 2030.
If they execute these long-term goals, they solidify Ireland not just as a location for data centers, but as the world's premier digital regulatory enforcement hub.
Which brings us to our final verdict. We promised you an executive-level evaluation and a definitive governance maturity score based on the intelligence you provided. Reading Ireland's current strategy on a scale from 0 to 10, we place it at a solid 7.
A 7 out of 10.
Walk us through the math on that justification.
It comes down to the split between ambition and execution. The macro policy vision, the securing of Euro HPC compute funding, and the ambition for talent pipelines are undeniably world-class. On those top-level metrics alone, it represents a 9 out of 10.
But the architecture is lagging.
Exactly. The rigid structural auditability at the institutional level, the actual codified mechanisms to validate and secure these systems is still highly theoretical, is playing catch-up to a private sector that, as we saw with Davincia Plus AILD, is already publishing its own reference frameworks.
So the private sector is pulling ahead.
Yes, so on the microstructural precision front, it's currently a 5 out of 10. Averaged out, it earns a 7. It has the foundational elements of robust infrastructure, but significant operational elements are currently still regulatory theater.
Thank you so much for providing such incredible multi-layered source material for this evaluation. Being able to cross-reference government strategy with private sector execution documents really allowed us to build out a comprehensive, clear-eyed assessment for you. And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you plan your own AI roadmap.
If national legislative frameworks take years to debate, draft, and pass into law, but foundation AI models evolve in mere months, will governments eventually be forced to abandon creating their own proprietary, slow-moving rules?
Will the state eventually just have to adopt private, open-source governance frameworks, like the Davincia Plus architecture you showed us, just to keep the lights on and stay relevant in a rapidly accelerating ecosystem? It's a fascinating question about the future of state power versus private innovation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.